Welcome back to Gun&ShotTV. This is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about yet another police surplus revolver. Now, I've done a few videos on different police surplus revolvers. I think there was a Model 10 Smith & Wesson, a Model 13 Smith & Wesson, and I'm pretty sure I did a Ruger Security 6, or Service 6 Police, pardon. This is interesting. This actually is not mine. This is one of the few guns that I will review that is not personally owned by me. This is a Model 15 K38 Combat Masterpiece. Now, this is in 38 Special, and it's very similar to a standard K Frame, as you can see here. This is your standard K Frame, and the big difference between the two is this one has target sights, an adjustable rear sight, and a quick draw front sight, and it has a ribbed barrel there, and it's got some serrations on the top here, some ridges to kind of break up the reflection and make it easier to sight. So, you know, like I said, not a huge difference from your standard M&P or Model 10 or whatever you want to call it, but it was really pretty much specifically set up for law enforcement officers. You got to remember, back in the post-World War II era, it was a pretty big deal for a lot of law enforcement officers to shoot well. They shot often, they qualified often. There was quite a bit of pistol teams. A lot of departments had their own team, and they had their own reloading and their own range. And so these guys shot quite a bit, and they wanted a gun that would, you know, keep up with them, be accurate, and be able to be flexible as far as the adjustable sighting really helped when you're switching from wad cutters for rifle or pistol team use. Then you're switching back to service ammunition. It's nice to have a sight that you can adjust and always know that it's going to be where you need it to be, versus the standard sighting system, which is pretty much worthless unless you're shooting the exact load that it's set up for. So in the 40s, Smith & Wesson came out with what they called the K38 Target Masterpiece. Now, that was essentially this gun with this adjustable sighting system, but in a longer barrel. Now, it had a standard target front sight. Now, the FBI and a couple other agencies went to Smith & Wesson and said, we like this gun, this would be a great service gun, but it's too long, and we want a snag-free front sight, so when you draw it from a holster, it can't get hung up. So Smith & Wesson pretty much came out with exactly that. They called it the K38 Combat Masterpiece. So essentially, you know, it's just your standard K-frame with these sights. So nothing huge, nothing really broke the mold there. But very, very popular with law enforcement officers. I'm bringing it a little bit closer and give you some close-ups of the various parts of the gun. A little bit closer. I'll hold up the standard K-frame. As you can see, the sights are quite a bit different. But other than that, the frame's essentially the same size. This particular one has a target trigger, which might be a little difficult to see here. But as you can see, the trigger is super wide on the Model 15 and actually sticks out both sides of the trigger guard there. So that allows you to get a nice, heavy placement on your finger, so the whole pad of your finger is pulling on the trigger, and you're not always moving around your grip. It's also got some nice serrations on the trigger. Now, this has the standard hammer to it. As a duty piece, I imagine it was easier to carry and draw on everything with the standard hammer. A bigger target hammer would be harder to get in and out of the holster and maneuver with, and as a duty piece, it was probably mostly shot double action anyways, so the hammer isn't as big of a perk. But this one is a Model 15-3, which means it was made in 1971, I believe. It was bought new by the person who carried it, and they carried it all the way up to the 90s. So these were pretty common and used by Air Force, security on base, Army bases, security guards at banks, stuff like that. In the 1950s, in 1955, Bill Jordan went to Smith & Wesson, he was a prominent gun writer at the time and law enforcement officer, and he pretty much said, here's the deal. You've got the Model 27 and 28. Those are great guns. Why can't we take that 357 and put it into a K38 frame size? And that happened. So that gun pretty much, that became the K19 Combat Masterpiece. But it's pretty much this exact same gun in 357 Magnum. And that was pretty much what most law enforcement officers that had the option upgraded to. because most law enforcement officers are pretty much into having the biggest, baddest gun of the time, or, really want to shoot quite a bit of power downrange if they need to. So these were pretty much eclipsed, other than if the department required it. But like I said, this one was actually purchased in 1970, 71, and was used as a duty gun all the way up until the 90s when the switch to autoloaders changed. So there's nothing wrong with these guns. They shoot fine. I've seen a few that have been bored out to 357. The frame can take it, but the cylinders on the Model 19s, I believe, had extra heat treating, so I don't think that's safe, but occasionally you will see these that were bored out to shoot 357. But definitely interesting guns, and you'll see them, because they're not in 357, you'll sometimes see beat up used examples like this start for about $300-400 and go up to somewhere around, maybe $700-800 for one that's like mint condition in the box or has an interesting backstory to it or something like that. I hope you learned a little bit more about the Smith & Wesson Model 15, or like I said, the K38 Combat Masterpiece. Definitely neat guns. If you find one in the wild for cheap, I recommend picking it up, or at least trying it out, shooting it, and seeing if you like it. I think you will. Obviously it's a revolver. You're limited to 6 rounds, but I think if you can get those 6 rounds on target, that's half the battle. So for Gun&Shot TV, this is Chris. Thanks for watching. If you've got any comments or any feedback, make sure you let me know, and I'll try and get back to you when I get a chance.